Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we are based, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay their respect to their elders past and present. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the EWB UNSW's Inspire series podcast, a platform where we converse with interesting people and share their learnings, and in particular, see how they apply their own knowledge and skills for humanitarian purposes. My name is 𝐀𝐿 𝐄𝐖𝐁 and I'm a third year UNSW Aerospace Engineering and Material Science student and currently the Partnerships Director for the UNSW Chapter. Alongside me is my co-host Alicia. Did you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Alicia and I'm a first year studying mechanical engineering at UNSW and I'm part of the EWB Partnerships team for this year.
Today we're joined by our special guest, Eleanor Earl, who's a PhD candidate at UNSW. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, really happy to be here today to talk to you more about my journey. As you said, I'm a PhD candidate with a Science Year Scholarship here at UNSW, but prior to UNSW life, I was a consultant in international development and infrastructure based in London and Hong Kong.
To start us off, many of our audiences have just started university or are either in their final year of high school and considering an engineering as a career path. So we'd love to know what drew you to engineering initially and how did you decide what field you wanted to go into?
Thanks, that's a really great question. And I think, to be honest, I explored lots of different avenues before I discovered civil and environmental engineering, which is what I ended up studying at undergraduate in the UK, where I'm from. So my mother would always say, if you didn't enjoy something when you went on a work experience or an industrial trip of some sort to, explore different careers, it was just as useful as enjoying something. So I think that was really encouraging, and I explored all different types of careers, mainly in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But a huge breadth from sort of biology all the way through sort of chemistry and physics related degrees. And then at the same time, my sister was studying materials science, and I was really interested in what she was doing. But I kind of wanted to weave in more geographical expertise as well. And I was quite interested in geophysics and all sorts of other different careers. And then I worked had work experience with a local civil engineer, and he was really passionate about fish passes. And I was just really inspired by the way he wove together his knowledge of biology and fish to civil engineering. And I thought, oh, that would be really cool if I could link the two together, and my passion for the environment and my passion for science and maths and people. So civil engineering really seems to be the way for me. And funnily enough, later in life, I was a mentor for engineering, well, not even engineering, just a broader charity for young people based in London. And I was really inspired by a talk by a chef and food writer. And it's nice to go to events, not always in engineering, but from other disciplines. And she said something that really inspired me, which was think about something you really want to change in the world and focus on that. And I think I did that without intentionally going down that path. But I think sometimes it can be quite overwhelming to think about the career that you want. But if you think about the thing that you want to change, I think that's a really useful way of framing it. And perhaps even is an interpretation of Gandhi's quote, "Be the change," which also really resonates with me.
So it's like a good mix of childhood dreams and first-hand experiences to get you into it. It's
something like that. And I wouldn't say there was any one experience. Like I mentioned, that civil engineer that was a friend of my parents, but it was many different experiences all adding together. And in the UK, I was really lucky. There was lots of different engineering organisations trying to get young people to consider careers in engineering and technology and science more generally. So I think I was really exposed to a lot of different things, and I was really privileged to have those experiences under my belt before I applied to university. But I must also say, I applied to both geography and to civil engineering, even on my form for university. So I'll be totally truthful. It was a very last minute decision which way I eventually went.
It looks like you have a lot of international experiences in uni. Did you go on exchange or anything similar?
So I didn't go on a exchange, but I did lots of different things which kind of gave me some of the some similar experiences. But I was very jealous of the students who did go on exchange, and actually visited them all in France and Germany at my university. And perhaps I'm making up for lost time now, coming to UNSW. So one of the things I did do, which I really recommend, is I did a placement with the International Association for the Exchange of Students for Technical Experience. Yes, I did look up a name beforehand. It's shortened to IASTE, but I think it's important to know what the longer words are. And it's an organisation that provides internships for students who are undertaking studies in technical fields such as engineering, science, IT and design, and puts them in placements all over the world. And fortunately, Australia is one of the partner countries of that organisation, and their applications are open. I actually checked this morning, and they've got all sorts of interesting things available, from Nigeria to the Czech Republic. So definitely have a look at that if that's something that you're interested in, and perhaps you haven't got the opportunity to go on a university exchange. So the other things that I did, I went on a lot of summer schools, both throughout my university time and also since graduating. So I did a summer school in Finland, one in China, one in the Netherlands, at different universities. So even though those are quite short experiences of maybe only a handful of weeks, I think they really helped shape who I am and my friendships, which have endured lots of different travels and journeys ever since. But some really strong friendships were made on those particular trips.
Did this studying abroad make you want to work overseas in the future, or was there other things that came into play for that?
I think there were lots of different things. So I think from the very beginning, I was obsessed with this book called Children Just Like Me as a kid, where I was really keen to learn about other people's lives, what their everyday was, what sort of building they went to school in, what they ate, what sort of cultural activities they participated in. I found that really interesting. I was really lucky that my family are avid travellers, and we were taken all over Europe in our summer holidays. So I think it's always been kind of instilled in me to be really curious about the world around me. And I guess it was kind of inevitable that my career would go in that direction.
For those who may be interested or curious about the IASTE program, would you be able to elaborate on your experience? For example, what you did and where you went specifically?
So I went to Jamaica with IASTE, and I did a placement with a civil and structural engineering consultancy in Kingston. And some of my friends also went on the IASTE placement. So I think it's a great organisation for finding really interesting placements that you probably could never find yourself. And I learned so much from that experience, and working in a different setting, and understanding how codes and standards were applied in such a different environment than the one I was used to. So I'd previously done some work placements in the UK. I'd done two actually, one in a water team and another in a geotechnical and environmental team. So this was a really interesting transition. And although I was sent there to work on more structural projects, I actually ended up doing lots of water, which is really my area of interest, and hence why I'm now doing a flooding related PhD here at UNSW.
Sounds like you had a wide variety of placement and internship opportunities during your undergrad degree. Do you think this helped you narrow down what you wanted to do later on for your graduate roles?
Definitely. I think it can be really hard to get work experience, and I found that too. But if you can get it, I think it's a huge foot in the door to other opportunities. And I was really lucky with the kind of combination of voluntary experience that I'd got through university, but also some of this work experience as well. So by the time I graduated, I had about 10 months, I'd say, of work experience, and I had been doing lots of voluntary work with Engineers Without Borders in the UK. I was co-president 1 year at my university, which was Cardiff University, and then I moved on to other regional roles within the organisation. So I think that really helped shape who I am today. I really enjoyed those positions, and the people that I worked with remain really close friends today through EWB. And yeah, I think, it was just little by little, step by step, I found my way into industry, and, was really lucky with the position that I found myself in, because I'd done quite a lot of homework to work out which team might be best suited for me at that time.
So moving on, ARUP was your first graduate experience, or you worked there for quite some time. Would you be able to share some of your experiences there?
When I graduated, I started at ARUP in their London office in 2014, and I worked for just over 2 years in their infrastructure group. And I had a really interesting job working in very much multidisciplinary teams on sites across London, but also further afield in Europe and Asia. Basically plugging in buildings and working on master plans. So, thinking about energy networks, water networks, flood risk, all sorts of different things that you need to think about when incorporating a site, however big or small it is, into its surrounding area. So I found that a really interesting job. But I really wanted to work in humanitarian and development contexts, and throughout that time I did lots of pro bono work. And through my EWB experience as well, I think that really gave me a step into international development. And I worked in ARUP's international development team for another couple of years. They're working on a huge range of different projects, again, in really wide-ranging teams, and that's what I've really loved from my consulting experience, that I haven't just been working with civil engineers, but I've been working with landscape architects, with all sorts of designers, social scientists, a huge breadth of people who are working in that area. So I worked mainly in sub-Saharan Africa and South and Southeast Asia, and then after a few years, an opportunity came up to go to Hong Kong and work in the water team there. So I then moved there for a year and was again working on some really interesting projects in East Asia. And it was great to get exposure to a different place to live and different working environment.
You've really highlighted some of the benefits of working in a multinational company. Would you be potentially able to elaborate more on your experiences in the Southeast Asia and the Sub-Saharan Africa regions? Kind of like what issues you are facing and how you collaborated with your ARUP team to find solutions for these issues.
I worked on lots of different projects throughout my time in international development. And some of those were really small and community focused. So I worked in Bangladesh doing work with a community on climate adaptation and ways in which, working with the community, we could provide technical advice to support them really bring their kind of dreams into reality. So that was all sorts of things, from looking at water quality, waste management, improving the streets, given that there was quite a lot of flooding issues going on during the monsoon period of the year. I've also worked in other contexts like refugee situations. I worked on solid waste management in the Rohingya refugee camps, and also delivered surface water management training, which links on to my work on drainage in humanitarian contexts. So I wrote some guidance with the Humanitarian Innovation Fund, working with lots of different partners to try and encourage people to look at surface water management differently in humanitarian contexts. And I've also worked on bigger projects at sort of city scale, looking at infrastructure resilience and how we can help cities deal with shocks and stresses that they may face and reduce those impacts, particularly on infrastructure. So I did that both on ARUP projects, but I also had a secondment to the Resilience Shift, which works with lots of different organisations to try and help people look at infrastructure resilience in new ways and help infrastructure cope better with all sorts of different shocks and stresses that we face, whether that be digital technologies and failure of those things in black swan events to impacts of climate change, heavy rainfall, heat waves, and other things like pandemics like we've had over the past 2 years. So there's all sorts of things that may cause shocks and stresses to infrastructure that we can do a lot better to cope with.
What were some of the benefits of working within a multidisciplinary team?
That was really helpful, I think, to shape my learning. So I did a civil and environmental engineering degree. So my degree was quite focused on my engineering discipline, although there's obviously quite a lot of variety in that, being geotechnical structures, water, environmental management, all manner of different things even within that. But I think it was really good for me to be exposed to other engineering disciplines, other social scientists, architects, all sorts of different planning disciplines. Yeah, it's really good, I think, to get a broad understanding of how people shape the urban environment and all the different disciplines involved in contributing to that.
You've also held roles where you managed international partnerships in projects, with a poverty alleviation theme and a WASH sector focus. What were some of your key learnings in regards to this?
Yeah, so I think there was a lot of learning, and it's hard to distill it into a podcast. But I guess the key things, I think, were kind of be patient and work collaboratively as much as possible. So I think we've covered some of that already, talking about all the different disciplines that I've worked with, but it's a real skill to bring everyone to the table, facilitate discussion and co-create. And that's something I'm still learning about today. And I've been really lucky to be exposed to such a variety of different projects, which has allowed me to little by little explore all of these different skills, whether they be the technical skills, but also the softer skills that you need to succeed in these different environments.
And how did these skills and learnings contribute to your motivations in pursuing a PhD?
So I think through this that I was really passionate about drainage of all things and how we could manage surface water better, and most of all how nature can play a part in that. So that wasn't something that came to me recently. It was actually something I discovered whilst I was at university and on work placements. I discovered this thing called sustainable urban drainage, as it's called in the UK, more frequently referred to as water sensitive urban design here in Australia. And really through that, I had this huge revelation that we could mimic natural processes to solve some of the challenges that we face in our urban environments if we can tailor it to the local ecology and local needs. So I'm definitely still on that journey. I haven't by any means solved everything, but I recognise water is a very precious resource, and I was really inspired by my supervisor's work and the wider work at UNSW and beyond in Australia, and thought this was a great opportunity to explore living in a new part of the world, but also learn some really vital new skills so that I can hopefully create even better things in the future.
So recently you've kind of taken the switch from industry to academics, and we're wondering how being in the industry and leading a team is different to your role in academia.
So I've only been a pure academic for 2 months. I was doing consultancy part-time for last year while I was in the UK waiting to come to Australia. So I guess I'm kind of new still to working in academia. I guess it really varies from PhD to PhD. My PhD is quite independent. Sometimes you're working very closely in big teams trying to solve lots of problems together. So it's a very different way of working, but I think can have similarities. And I think the partnerships that exists between industry and academia are really important. So I think it's kind of a spectrum, and it can kind of blur a little bit, I guess, in between. So there are definitely some synergies and similarities. You know, I'm obviously working with others still and need to work collaboratively and need to be really clear at communicating, and perhaps in a slightly different way, because I think academic writing is very different from what I might produce in industry. You know, writing papers, technical articles, all that sort of thing is fairly new to me still. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here finally and to be learning different skills. And as I say, hopefully developing areas that I'm slightly weaker at, so that I can help create the change that I'd like to see in the world, especially through surface water management.
Yeah, so that change you're talking about and seeing in the world, is that kind of your motivation that drew you to take a PhD at UNSW looking at flood resilience in the Pacific Islands, or was there something else that made you take this big change?
I think that was a major driver, but I mean, it's fantastic to live in such a vibrant city like Sydney. I'm really excited to be living in a different part of the world. Yeah, I think UNSW is a really great university, and I've really been enjoying getting to know the wider university community, including the EWBers at UNSW and beyond. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here, and there was lots of, I guess, major and minor drivers that kind of drew together and enabled me to take the leap into academia. But I have to say, a PhD was something that was on my mind for quite a while, and I couldn't quite find the right one. So I was really thrilled when I saw this science year scholarship at UNSW that would allow me to bring together lots of interests that I had, both with flood management, use of digital technology, working with communities, and all coming together in one PhD.
As an undergrad, how important do you think is taking on extracurriculars, such as, volunteering opportunities with EWB or other self-development programs?
I think it's hugely important. I think we're really lucky at university that we get to maybe put ourselves in different contexts and explore different activities beyond our course. So I did it EWB, as I've mentioned already. And I learned lots of different skills through that. I was organising conferences and trips, and I was really busy doing lots of different things, coordinating lots of volunteers. These are all things that I didn't really learn through my studies. I was also exposed to different ways of approaching engineering, which I think is really important, especially given that we now, really recognise that we're living in a world of a climate emergency and biodiversity emergency. So I think being able to look through new lenses in the field of engineering is really key. And then beyond EWB, I also did a lot of sports, and really enjoyed getting out into nature. I was near the Brecon Beacons, which is in South Wales, but wherever I've been, I've really enjoyed exploring the environment around me. And I've also participated with various engineering institutions, and I've done that ever since joining university. Now I'm a member of the Institution of Civil Engineers, which is based in the UK, and I still do voluntary work for the organisation. And I'm currently on the nominations committee, which is involved in how the election process works for the trustee board and the president. Which is really interesting insight and very different from my PhD world. So I think it's really useful to expose yourself to lots of different things, and through that also develop your network and a community around you. There's obviously things that I have, didn't know about, or things like I guess unknown, so things that have just kind of come out of nowhere through that I had no idea about and wouldn't have known how to approach, but through that it's really helped develop me. I guess this isn't necessarily an extracurricular activity, but something that I'd really recommend is getting yourself some mentors. So I didn't really recognise quite what this was and how it would be important for my career until I graduated. I think I had mentors before without kind of knowing it and getting maybe the best out of them. But I think a range of different people, it can be people in your field, in your organisation that you're working in or studying in. It could be people outside, and there's lots of different networks available now to help you create these connections. And I think just, expose yourself to things, I guess, beyond your comfort zone, as they say, is really helpful.
Cool, yeah. So we had another question asking, so there are many, learnings and technologies that we carry from the more developed nations around the world, such as, Hong Kong, the UK, Sydney, into more of these developing places such as the Pacific Islands. We were just wondering, on the flip side, are there many learnings or opportunities we can learn from, these less developed places that can be transferred back into the developed world?
Yeah, I think this is a tricky question. I'm not sure I'm entirely comfortable with the words developed and developing, because I guess what does good look like? I mean, good looks like to me that everyone's healthy, has access to education, and all the kind of infrastructure services that they need to survive without compromising the natural world around us. And I'm not sure there's many places in the world, developed or developing, that I think truly have managed to achieve all of that. And I think things like the Sustainable Development Goals enable us to kind of level the playing field, maybe. And we've, no matter which country you live on this planet, there are Sustainable Development Goals that are really important to you. So I think we really need to kind of rethink the way that we approach our kind of environment. And I think, now we've got clarity on, as I mentioned before, climate change and biodiversity crisis. We know that we can't consume resources at quite the rate that we have previously. So we've really got to look through things in a different lens. So yes, I think there's things that we can learn from low-income countries, but I also think that we've kind of got to look at this whole problem through a different lens, and you can't just necessarily take one thing from one community and expect it to work in another. So even things I have seen in low-income countries may not work in higher income countries, because it just, all the cultural nuances that exist. But I do think that, many communities that I have had the privilege of visiting in low-income countries perhaps often view nature in a different way, think about the circular economy. Even maybe they don't call it the circular economy, it's just trying to live in a sensitive way to the economic and environmental environment that they find themselves in. I think these are all really important learnings, and I think we've seen a huge shift in the way that international development has viewed these things. And you can see that, for example, through looking at maybe the Millennium Development Goals that came out in the 2000s, which I appreciate might be around the time when our listeners were born. But even in that time, through those being very focused on low-income countries, now we see that the Sustainable Development Goals, which came out in 2015, are very much focused on everyone. And I think everyone has a part to play in this. And no matter whether you're working domestically or internationally, everyone has a part to play in the Sustainable Development Goals and in everyone's future. So we really don't work in isolation anymore. So I think engineers are hugely needed in Australia. I think we've seen some harrowing pictures this week, or rather over the last few weeks, in New South Wales and in Queensland with the floods, the widespread floods that we've seen. So I think my particular field, looking at hydrology, is really needed to solve some of these really big challenges, and also incorporating nature-based solutions wherever possible is also, I think, a really exciting prospect for Australia in in infrastructure, and it's something that's already been going on, as I mentioned, through water sensitive urban design, but could be really scaled to encompass a whole range of different issues. But I also hope through this call, I've also shed a light on the fact that, engineering is an essential skill set, but there are also so many other careers that contribute to the world around us. And I guess finding a good fit to your skill sets and your interests is really important. So I guess, like, looking to the future, I think engineers will remain a vital part of the country of Australia and our world, but perhaps we've spent a lot of time kind of directing the forces of nature for the good of humans, which is kind of the Institution of Civil Engineers motto. But now I think we need to play more of a broker role, making sure that the environment stays intact, is rejuvenated, as required to restore some of the damage that we've already done, whilst also playing the need to meet the needs of humans. So it's a real balancing act, I think, that needs to be played in the future of engineering.
So to wrap up, we do have one final question for today. So looking forward, what are some of the amazing works or outcomes that you hope to achieve in the future?
Sure. So there's lots of things I hope to achieve. I guess the big research one is that more nature-based infrastructure will become mainstream, particularly in my field in flood management. And, through that, we'll hopefully use the traits that are already found in nature in a really ecologically sensitive way to help meet human needs. And I'm really excited to be working in the Pacific Islands because I'm learning how that way of thinking can be used in potentially data scarce environments and places where there isn't significant drainage infrastructure already. I'm also doing other smaller initiatives myself. So I'm starting a podcast called Around the World in 80 Drains, looking at how communities have been dealing with surface water management in creative ways. And I guess, trying to see the achievement and joy in the everyday. The future is far away. And, just little things, whether it's breaking down a problem to help my research, ordering a local fruit and veggie box through our on-campus food cooperative, taking a dip in an ocean pool. I think these are kind of everyday achievements, and what's for certain is our lives are going to be filled with uncertainty. So however much I try to plan, there are bound to be unexpected twists and turns in the road. And some of these might be hugely positive twists, like finding a research opportunity at the University of New South Wales. So I'm really trying my best to find the joy in the everyday.
That brings us to the conclusion of today's episode. To recap, we explored a bit about Eleanor's undergraduate journey, her period of traveling around the world, looking at and working for various industry, before finally in the recent years moving to Australia to pursue a PhD at the University of New South Wales. And we definitely did include a few bonus questions from our audience at the end. Please do keep in touch with our social media to stay informed with our upcoming events. And once again, thanks everyone for listening.